Gospel of Judas, a gospel that portrays Judas, the famous betrayer of Jesus in the New Testament,
Hey,
as
Rob.
somehow having secret knowledge about who Jesus really
You
was.
got any Norby?
Irenaeus, the Christian church father and heresiologist, wrote about this long-lost gospel in 180 CE while criticizing a particular Christian sect. They say that Judas, the traitor, was thoroughly acquainted with these things, and that he alone, knowing the truth as no others did, accomplished the mystery of the betrayal.
Now, how was that
So
possible?
Jesus was talking to Judas
What? Yeah.
like no other.
By him all things, both earthly and heavenly, were thus dissolved.
So Judas hung himself at the end.
How do you know?
And there's, like, these are all what ifs. What if
okay.
Judas really didn't hang himself with a rope,
I never.
but he hung himself
I never thought he did. Literally.
like that? And what if Judas already hung himself, but there's another Judas in place? There's another Judas in place. Like there's a person that is okay with playing the Judas role, even though they don't believe who they're coming after is Jesus. And then there's Judas, the actual Judas, that when he must decrease and Christ must increase. That kind of
No, that's John
Judas
the Baptist.
hangs himself, he hangs up his career. Because once Christ was crucified on the cross, then I'll show you in this other clip over here.
Which one do you want me to set free? Barabbas or Jesus?
Him. No. So I heard Barabbas means son of the Father. So he's a son of the Father. But which Father? Well, he's the son of the devil, of course. Is he? What if he's not? What if he's the son of the Father? What if?
Well, that would mean that he had to hold on a rub. That would mean that he would had to have repented in order to get out and set free, like set free of your mental state of mind. You're set free. Then he would become the son of the Father, just like everybody else has the right to become the son of the Father by the Son of God.
What you thought was really isn't. And Judas was actually the son of the Father. Because he was let go, he was set free. He was let loose.
Satan was let loose.
Satan was let loose.
Right? Yeah.
The saints have been set free, but when you're let loose, you're free. He was a murderer. Satan was a murderer from the beginning. From the beginning of what? From the beginning of,
Again, Satan being a murderer from the beginning is a spirit that works through his children. And when he's your father, you can always be adopted by God. So when he's your father, you're going to do those things. And then when you finally cast them out of your own head, you stop participating in those things. And don't worry, everybody else falls in line too, where they stop participating in these things. There's a time period, comes to its end, and it's on the cross. The creation of what was created at this time. He was a murderer from the beginning. So there's a Judas up. What if there's a Judas up deck? Like he's next up. But let's just say he's not actually Does
Judas.
Does that mean you're Judas? Are you hand signaling?
But he's told that he is by
somebody tell you
Judas
that?
himself. In order to get him
Did you tell
to-
him that he was Judas?
in the end to hang it up. Because what if one interpretation is to hang it up,
I agree with that. Yep.
and what if the other is to hang up your career as Judas, as the one?
Wait, what?
What if somebody already hung it up? Let's say the actual Judas / Lucifer would be the one that didn't do it. That was more like he knew what he was doing with Eve, but he wasn't deceived. In order to be deceived, you would have to have went ahead and ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You would have to have done that. And so let's just say that the real Judas is like the Lucifer type, and because he wants to do it better than God, meaning the Spirit, God. And that was the original plan from the beginning. And then it trickles downhill with people that are underneath status of that Judas that's playing that role. And then so that Judas plays that role, and he has a son that the son knows, where he came from. And then but then there's another Judas, because Robin's going to talk about this later on in the video. There's another Judas, like 3 types of Judases that seem to have conjured up in Robin's head somehow, that he's saying, what if? Like what if that's true? I mean, what if there is another Judas? Everyone has a different level of understanding, but the main Judas is the one that actually knows the truth, and he really does repent, and he goes and hangs up his career. When he's done, he spills his guts. The next Judas is the one that doesn't believe Jesus can do it better, so he's going to try to do it better. Doesn't believe who his actual father is, because everybody's told that there's something that they're not, one level down underneath of people, so you don't catch on. The other Judas would be the one that is actually the son and knows and has the ability to technically be able to see. Like he would have to have eyes to see. And then the third Judas would be the one that is the scapegoat, the one that they're going to try to get to fulfill Scripture literally, as if he did go and hang it up. But the middle Judas would be someone that already did this. And then the real Judas would be the one that didn't do it. And then the second down the line did it. And then the third down the line is going to do it. And then, but neither one of the Judases continue on the way that they did, except for the one that spills his guts. And then the other one is going to take control of the area. And then the third one is going to be the one that's really deceived. And he's getting ready to hang this up. And he's getting ready to get into place. He's getting ready to take over. But Daniel was interpreting King Belshazzar's dream that the writing's on the wall, this kingdom is over. So anybody that's looking to do this to get a gain, and the Christ spirit, you're told there's a Christ spirit. You don't truly have to agree, but if you get an assignment to target the spirit, you'll target the spirit through the technology that you have in your hand, that you have been given authority to be able to see. You got to be able to see outside of the realm of things. So if you have the spirit, and over here, you might even know you might even know some people. You might know people. You might have known people for some time. And so, promises seem pretty legit. I remember my kid's mom told me one time she's King Jesus. And she's getting her inheritance soon. It just reminded me of, everybody can have Jesus in their heart. Everybody. But to be the Jesus, the specific one that they try to put words in his mouth to say that he's God when he never said that he was. Yeah, matter of fact, he said you guys are gods. And isn't that what he said? So you are all gods, and he is the Son of God. And he's been given the power to be able to have others become sons of God, just like he is. It's just entitlement. Everybody wants to be entitled to something when it's not even your spot to be. And when it's people's spot that they're entitled, well, they just, if it comes, it comes. If not, then it ain't meant to be. So Rob's going to try to attempt to explain some of that over there about the different types of Judases being played out, the different types of Jesuses being played out. There's many of them, and the roles that each one has, because the real Judas would be the one that he coordinates it to get it to that point. And the people that he's with, I always thought Jesus' disciples were like all godly people from the gate, and he was hanging out with, like, I thought that's why Christ picked them, because they were all godly people. Then I start to realize, he did not pick them because of that reason. He picked them because there was a spirit that was leading him into finding who he needed to find. The biggest deception in the world is the fact that happens. He goes back, he hangs up his career, he decreases, Christ increases. Even though the cross crucified, but again, Robin will explain later on down the line about how Daniel, he was interpreting dreams. And if you just swapped like the story of Jesus and then put Daniel in where Jesus was, and then Jesus over here where Daniel is, Jesus in the Daniel situation, in a literal sense, sounds more realistic than the one where, because you never heard about Daniel walking on water, but he had the same spirit as Christ, right? He's able to interpret dreams. That's what Christ was able to do. Walking on water kind of seems, I don't remember hearing anywhere where Daniel walked on water, but I do remember when he was, even though he said keep your gifts to Belshazzar and give them to someone else, they still gave him the purple robe. And when they were crucifying Jesus, they put a purple robe over him while they were crucifying him, while Daniel was telling him the interpretation of dreams. Do you think, as he was telling them that your kingdom's numbered, that it went very, like they're just going to accept that? Or do they have to see it for themselves? That's what happens. That's why Daniel didn't accept the gifts, because that was putting him third in charge. He knew that he was going to be second charge to King Pharaoh, that whoever rules the entire planet, whoever that person is, he would be put second charge, but not third in charge. Third in charge means you'll jump the gun. Somebody is already willing to accept third in charge already right now, and then there's another, like a Judas, the lowest level Judas that doesn't know, it has to be younger. He is looked at as getting ready to step into what we've already stepped into like 4 years ago. So he's getting ready to step into something that was already stepped into. And the person that's getting ready to think that they're stepping into it because they're taking the third in charge, thinking they're second, but they're not. That person, and then the next, which means whoever the real Judas is, whoever the real mouthpiece for Lucifer is, whoever the real, whichever one of those witnesses gets out that true word and does it the way that God needs them to do it, then that is something that already took place. We're coming to the very end of that, and that's why somebody else is getting ready to take that place, because they see it. They see it, like they don't agree with. It's like that you were supposed to take over. Why aren't you taking over? Here, get out of the way. I'll take over. And then that person takes over, but that things fail shortly after when that thing happens. And then the final one is the one where it's almost like John 3:16, who gave his only begotten son to sacrifice him. Because if you can convince somebody to, be like the Judas role. You don't believe that's Jesus, obviously. It's just, look, come here, son, come here. We're gonna pretend he is. We know he's not. I mean, I know we all don't know. I mean, they don't know. I mean, nobody believes it. So you don't. Man, come on. Yeah, absolutely. I'll do the deal for sure. And then, but first, before you join our team as a Mason, you're gonna have to hang it up, lift them up, lift it up. You have to do it. You want to be in charge. It's the way it is. The one that's already getting ready to take place had already had that done. Like, what if? Because Robin was talking about what ifs. What if that second person in charge, who thinks they're first, already had this done inside her host's body, and then the next one in line would be like John 3:16's only begotten Son, as if like the Son of God. Well, yeah, the Son of God, the God of the world. But what about the real Son of God? Did God ever have a real son? Well, yeah, he had Jesus. Jesus was his son. So God is the voice speaking out of the Bible, talking to Jesus about what's going on. He gave his only begotten Son to be sacrificed. Even though the true reality of Christ being sacrificed is he just gave his life for everybody else that wanted to stab him in his back. He hung on the cross because he was reaching out to that side and that side, both sides together. Both sides, up or down. Being crucified as he's doing it, and Judas was like part of the mastermind behind being able to coordinate things and have it done, and to tell somebody else that you're Judas, and to have somebody else under him that you're gonna play Judas. You're gonna be Judas, but we know you're Jesus. So, and then you already don't. You don't even believe in Jesus. You don't even believe in Judas. You don't know much of the Bible. We're just gonna tell you you're playing Judas role, and we're gonna have you come after whoever we say is Jesus. We're gonna have you, do your thing. Deception, 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 all the way down, because from the beginning, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And from the beginning of the foundation of the world, the new world that's being created, the beginning of the foundation, you have to lay a foundation first. First thing has to happen, Daniel has to see the abomination of desolation standing or hanging in the holy place. And then you flee to the mountains, to Judea. The Jews, or the Judeas flee to the mountains. But you have to see that first in order to see the rest of it. Because either way you look at it, Robin here, that, like, what if Judas, again, what if you just didn't really know that everything that was taught to us was purposely taught to interpret it basically the exact opposite, and with fear? I can agree with that. Daniel interpreted a dream
I can agree.
for Belshazzar.
Are you sure about it? You don't sound sure.
And even though they offered him the gold chain around his neck, dressed in purple, a robe, he said, keep it for yourself. He'll still interpret your dream because you're offering him third place. And he knows, Daniel knew, that's not his place, it's not his time. His time has not come yet. Therefore, when you're offering him the robe, he's saying, no, it's not my time yet. But as they were crucifying Jesus, and that's where second in charge comes in, who has the same spirit as Daniel. When they were crucifying Jesus, they put a purple robe around him when they were mocking him, as they were in sync with Daniel's situation and Jesus' situation.
And Joseph's. Don't forget about
So
Joseph.
what if you just flip-flop Jesus and Daniel? What if you put Daniel in Jesus' situation? And then you envision him getting horrifically nailed to a cross the way that Jesus did. And then take Jesus and put him in a situation where Daniel is.
Daniel's promoted.
Now that's more realistic. Take Daniel's situation where he was and put Jesus there. Now, so Jesus was interpreting their dreams. Jesus knew Belshazzar and the gifts, that his kingdom's numbered. And he knew that they were the ones that were ruling the planet with this right here. And he also knew that the kingdom was coming.
How do you know
fallen,
all
it was
this?
fallen.
Who
And
told
when
you?
everybody that does anything
I think
with
you're an
this
agent. I think you work for
at
Cleco
that
right
time was not
think
going
you do.
to continue on in the same way.
now. I think Robin's
So
an agent.
what if Judas was playing another character where he was okay with
Are you
being the Judas role?
Are you okay
Because
with
he
that,
didn't really
Robin?
believe Jesus. But the real Judas did know Jesus, because the real Judas is the one that pinpointed.
So you're trying to say
Jesus.
you know Jesus?
He's
then.
the closest
See
one
that?
to him
He's
with
slick.
the money.
He's slick.
And then likewise in real life, it would make sense to have. It's like,
What if?
you could take on that role,
What if?
only if you're close.
Like horseshoes.
Even if you're good at playing horseshoes, if you're close, you're probably going to play the best role. The deception is that those
You think
30
you know
shekels
something?
you got, and then the fact that you were promised all types of things that were going to happen in this world for you, but you have to, first thing you got to do is...
doesn't. You tell me before you're gonna put that there.
Judas
Come on, man, hurry up. People don't got all the time. Let me pause this for you.
hung on a cross right here. Captain Obvious.
And they know not. Father, forgive them. And they know not what they do.
So they don't know what they're doing. You believe that? So Judas as let's just say there's Judas A, Judas B, and Judas C. So here's Judas.
So there's Adam's apple.
I mean, he's ripping something off, but if I didn't know any better, I would look
I
at
don't
the
think you do,
symbolism as
actually.
being ripping out your Adam's apple. And then if I didn't know any better, I would say that
Woe to those who
you're
are
also
who give suck in those days.
hanging it up or burning as a
Burn.
sacrifice.
You have ordered a sign hung above Jesus' head.
And the reason why
A peacock.
Caiaphas is upset,
You're being ironic,
Caiaphas.
Your Excellency,
Caiaphas.
but the wording is off. The sign should read, Jesus, who claimed to be King of the Jews.
Relax, Caiaphas.
because what he did was he wrote the correct sign. Alright, so as the theme goes, it's his last breath, and then it's showing in the next scene. So Judas is hanging it up. He threw whatever it is on the ground,
Nope, I think it was the shepherd.
and then
Or did he give him back?
Spend eternity with me, with my father. What do you say?
with my father. So now let's close your eyes because you're asleep anyway. What if? So what if Jesus here was talking about to his son, like, why don't you spend eternity with me, with my father? So what if Jesus was talking to his son In other words, like, together forever.
It's not too late. It's never too late.
Because John 3:16, for he gave his only begotten Son. As it is in heaven, so shall it's going to be on earth. When you hear the story about God giving his only begotten Son, he gave his only begotten Son through his Spirit, and he sacrificed and took the sins upon the world and changed people's, like, their hearts, and turned them back to the fathers, and with Elijah, like, doing that, with that Spirit is able to do that, to turn the hearts back to the fathers. So here with Jesus he's telling them it's not too late, but apparently, according to what you've been taught, it was too late, and Judas hung himself, and then there's a host body hanging yourself, and then there's the true meaning, which is hanging up your career and spilling your guts. Because why would God give his only begotten Son to be murdered, and then after that it's over? Why? So then look at it the other way around, of living like Daniel did. Look at it like Joseph, where he still lived. He just went through his brothers just gave him a hard time, and then just look at it as these problems happen to the same person, the same spirit. The same spirit just has a different name in the Bible at a different time. One of them has a name in the Old Testament, and then the other one is in the New Testament. With the Old Testament, there's all the old laws, there's sinning going on. In the New Testament, John baptizes Christ by announcing him as the Lamb, because he's seen the Spirit descending upon him in the state. But at what point did that take place, and at what point did this take place? And as soon as he dies, the rain starts to come, and at least in this movie, symbolizing that the two witnesses have stopped withholding the rain. So one Judas hangs it up. The other Judas, one Judas lifts everything up. That way nothing's on the ground, because if you don't lift it up, it's going to be on the ground, according to the fear-pushed perception of Satan.
Well,
That's
I
why
think
his
it's
time
true,
is short.
actually. See, he doesn't
Everybody's
believe
tired
too
of
many
it.
things.
They're
but
fed up with the way
fed
that
up with
direction's
you.
going. So that one lifts it up, but he's the one that's deceived, because the real Judas,
They're both deceived. Two levels.
what if, of course, scenarios, what if the real Judas, he hung up his career because he was basically, he had to decrease. He wanted to be Jesus. So he was the closest to him. But what if people, he was communicating with him the most, and he seemed to know the truth of the matter. So Judas, as the actor who's acting like, that's why I said the real Judas would be the first one to know Jesus. When you read the story, Judas is the actual closest one to him, like when it comes to money, and he's the one responsible for it. So that would make sense that Judas would know that that's him, because he's the one that has to show him and turn him over. And then there's the other one that doesn't believe that is Jesus, because that's his place. He is looking to take that place. And then there's another level where the Judas doesn't even believe one way or another, and is just willing to go ahead and go after whoever they're pretending that Jesus is, even though true Judas really knew who it was. Even to an extent where he even did that because he would have a twin sister or a twin brother.
Well, no,
Well,
he didn't do
from
that.
the outside it's going to look like a sister, so you're not going to know. So let's say that the one Judas hung up his career and he didn't even do that, and that's the entire deception of all. And that would have to line up with like Lucifer himself. Because
I'll tell you what, Robin, I remember looking at the art museum at the top. It did show the king up there naked, and it showed his private parts hanging outside, and it showed a woman next to him, and then it looked like his wife next to him, and so it showed that there's a male, because there is a male that is supposed to have 7 women. So it would be a leader, it would be a ruler that has 7 actual women with him. And so you kind of look at that as, I kind of symbolize that as being like how John was the one writing the book of Revelation, and then Christ came to John through the Spirit. And so there's still truly is a man. There is a Jewish man that 7 women at this moment should be taking a hold of, because they're saying, we heard that God's with you. The 7 women heard that God was with him. So as the Spirit goes, the Christ Spirit is also with you. We heard God's with you. So there's supposed to be a male in the end that's how that works. Because he wants to do it better than God. And then there would be the Son. So if there's another level of, say, real life work history, you'll have somebody that always thinks that they can do it better than their father in real work history. If it's in corporations, the kids, the kids feel like they can do things better than their dad, even though they don't know any better. Because if you were that way too at one point in your life, you thought you can do things better than your dad. I never thought that way about my pop. Some of us can, but it's not a competition.
But so there's a Lucifer wanted to do it better than God. Cain offers plant vegetation from the ground that God was just not interested in, because Cain was taking it literally.
There was evil intent.
And so the Father and the Son and Judas was the closest to Jesus, and he winded up hanging it up. But what if one of them just got tricked into doing it? And then you'll have the actual, let's say, Lucifer would have a son, not per se like as he grew up with him, not even as, because everything has to be mimicked what God did. So Lucifer will have his only begotten son, he'll play God, and then the only begotten son will, again, and when God gave us only begotten son, opposed to being a stepchild and being raised by a stepfather, that understanding also is God was never, or Jesus never really had a dad. He never really had a father. So he was like, he was sacrificed because he basically was alone. But he had the Father, the Spirit. That's what people couldn't quite understand back then. Play the same role as Jesus, the only begotten Son, even though he's not Jesus. He's just one that's deceived. And so there's three types. There would be a Lucifer in this world that has the ability to surveil everything and see all. Then he would have a son, not that he actually raised him, but from a distance. It would kind of have to have the same type of power to be able to see things and surveil them as you're seeing it and discerning it. And then the third level would be the one that is in training, getting ready to go through that process. But we're at the end of that. That to me would, and then again, David, King David, he mourned for his son. It was at least a week beforehand, or at least a week of time, when he knew that he was going to lose him, because what's his name? Nepsala? Yeah. So he was, and in the story, when he became king, because he did become king, his son, David, King David's son. So there's also going to be a real David. There has to be a name, someone with the name David, to also play that role. And then Lucifer would be more the one that's doing that. The whole skit would be like his Jesus. Basically, it's like King David. He has his Jesus. So when Jesus shows up and then they already have their Jesus, well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to pick that Jesus, like King David will pick that Jesus, and that's his. So that in real life, you're picking you're technically picking like Judus, Lucifer, in this movie, this what if movie that I'm writing, because it's just about all types of interpretations as to what could be. You can take this one or you can leave it. Doesn't matter. If you're experiencing it and you know it, well, then you're going to take it. And then the other ones, you're going to know how to leave them out, because that doesn't even make sense. Because if it's happening in your own life, you can experience how these things are moving along and how everybody is being set up and put in place because of the role and because of the money. So when the Jews picked their Messiah, and that's like the David type, but his name's not David, but because Christ was with David, it's everything mingles together, where this person could be that person and that person could be both of them as it transitions from one to the other. Like Elijah and Elisha, same person, same spirit. Elijah was lifted up. Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind, and Christ was lifted up. And mind you, Elijah was being attacked by Jezebel, because he went and he had to tell them about what they were doing. And so in the end he got taken up in a whirlwind alive. So he was alive. Didn't say anything about him getting hurt or being nailed to a cross or put a crown of thorns on his head anywhere. But same type of story. And then so with Elijah becoming a double portion, well, that's like Christ resurrecting and continuing on. But in the story, Elisha continues on as that Christ, because he always got lifted up. Christ got lifted up. Daniel got promoted, which is a lifting up. And Daniel interpreted dreams, but he never got nailed to a cross either. So if you just take Jesus and put him over there with Elijah, how that was happening, because you heard Elijah had to come first. And then Christ said, well, You've done what you wanted to with him. The steps involved and the similarities of the stories interchanging can help you get a different perspective of your interpretation as to what you were taught your entire life, the same thing that I was taught. These are all my opinions, these are my views, this is how I see it, this is how I look at it. I don't need to believe either one is the absolute correct one, because all of them are correct. So when you're trying to pick one and you can't see the interpretation of the other way of seeing it, then you lose the understanding of it, and then you start judging another way of looking at it. But it's for different levels of groups of people. Where are you at? Did you start this thing already and we're at the end, or are we at the middle, or are we at the very beginning? Because whoever's at the beginning is the true one that's going to win. Whoever's in the middle is the one that's going to accept. That would be the Antichrist. And then the one that's in the end, well, that's where they're trying to get him to fulfill Scripture literally by getting played, tricked, hung up, and actually hanging himself because of the shame of what you thought was going to happen didn't, and you were told about it beforehand. Don't do it. Do not do that. Don't touch that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, son. Don't do it. Because of the reason. Some have already done it, but you, it's different. There's a reason why David also mourned for his son, because when you know that the Spirit has you and this is promised and you're not going to change your mind, but you can see it coming to pass as well, I can understand why he would mourn for his son, because he's seen his death coming and he couldn't do anything about it. So John 3:16, he gave his only begotten son. I mean that's the scripture in the Bible, that God gave his only begotten son. As it is in heaven, so shall it be on earth. As it is on earth, so shall it be in hell. As it is in hell, so shall it be to the very depths of hell. Wherever you think you are, think again. Think again. This kingdom is ending for everybody. It's ending. It's coming at my direction full force, and I just have to brace for it. It's coming in your direction full force, and you have to brace for it. And it's already been coming in their direction, the ones that are behind the scenes, because they are the ones that have been going through the tribulation. Immediately after those days, the sun will be darkened. The moon will not give its light. The moon gets its light from the sun. When the sun's darkened, so is the light that is getting its reflection from the sun. All the stars are going to fall from heaven immediately after those days of the tribulation period that we're getting ready to come to. Because as soon as that happens, the sun will be darkened. The truth will be taken out. But will it be taken out for a long period of time, or is it the reset 3-day period and then continuing on? Because that's truly the halfway point, but it's the ending for everybody, but it's also the beginning for the beginning of the foundations of the world that was created beforehand. We're getting ready to get to that point. Depending on where you're at is how you're going to suffer or not. So I'm going through my suffering now. I'll go through more, and then they'll say, well, it's because you're saying it, you're going to make it happen. No, it's because you see it coming beforehand, so you say it anyway, because it's going to happen regardless. Therefore, when you can see it coming with whatever it is, even if it's fear tactics towards you, I say it out loud anyway. Satan has to come at everybody with his best shot, the biggest tactic, fear tactic imaginable. But remember, God, he said, thou shalt not touch the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you do, you're going to die. That can be literal, because when you do, and you shouldn't have, because what you did it for was the wrong reason, because they're not going to do what they said they were going to do. Therefore, that's not going to go well either. And then the shame on top of it does something mentally to people's brains, where they would contemplate suicide. I'm sure it's already happened plenty of times when people just were tricked. And so in order to, if you think you're going to touch the tree of life, well, that has those swords, those flaming swords protecting it every which way direction. And the Word of God is able to protect that, because when you have the truth and the understanding of how things are being played out, you can protect yourself by that truth, because that truth is known by others that are behind the scenes that also have a higher position than you, and they're your commanders. So it's about the top commanders having that understanding. And all I can do is try to warn people what I see beforehand. And there's reasons why you're told not to touch it at specific periods of time, like at the beginning of the foundations of the world. Don't do it. Here we are, we're at the beginning of the foundation of this new world that will not be the New World Order for the way that you perceived it to be. Not going to happen. But you're going to think it's going to happen. And then when it comes to pass it doesn't. Here's this video to look back on. Today is June 29th, 2021, 9:18 p.m. And I'm telling you, there's a time coming up real soon that the way things were are not going to be anymore. Be the other Judus in this system, where this Judus actually believes that he should be Jesus. Then there's even a more of a deceptive degree of a Judus where he doesn't believe in Jesus, but he has no problem playing that role, because he's offered he's basically offered the world. And that's why when Christ is crucified, that's why the same. Oh yeah, and the other thing about David's son, when he was put in place, and then one of David's commanders, because he had already had the top commanders in charge, and then when Absalom, when he went after his own father to try to kill him, he winded up getting. Well, first they all crossed over the river, right? I think it was Jordan. David and his people to rest, but also Absalom, he wound up getting caught in a tree, and he got hung by a tree. So when you're going by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and you get hung up, you've been crucified in that sense. And then in a literal sense, by doing that, but not receiving any of the promises, they were all broken. And with the spirit of Absaloms in the world that would be after their fathers to take their place. It's not just one in the world. There's been plenty. But in this situation, he, just like Judus, when he was coming after David, he got caught and killed and hung it up. He got hung by the tree. And by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He died. So Lucifer, or not, the serpent says, "You shall surely not die." Like basically God's lying. Now he's just telling you that you'll die by being crucified to your spark of life either goes in one direction or the other. Either way, on that side of the cross and that side of the cross, both of their bones were broken. The scriptures cannot be broken, because the truth, when you know what the truth is, it literally sets you free. You know that all this is fear tactics, and this is a spiritual battle, and we're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're not fighting people and I'll kill you. Get your hands up. We're not fighting with people. That's why you just let the Spirit take care of that. Like, yeah, hey, Michael, can you stand up real quick? Hey, thanks. Hey, William, can you? Were you locked up at St. Gabe's when you were a kid? Did you go with that thing where you were able to get some, or was that Glen Mills? Anyway, can you take care of that sleeper hold? And so it's like a sling and a shot. And it wasn't even like a Goliath. It was, I think it was his brother or something. Because that's why David didn't actually, like the symbolism of David didn't actually literally kill him. He did it with a sling and a shot. So he used the sling and a shot in order to handle his business spiritually. So that's how things work spiritually. Satan tries to come at you with everything he has. Saul and his group, and then they'll just see it manifest in real life. Like, this is how that works. This is how it's going to continue to work. It's just how things are, and you're seeing it. So submit and give up. Exact time it's showing you in the movie that Judas hung himself. So one of them is David's son hung himself. David was known to have the Christ Spirit with him at he did his thing, but just like Jesus, if you want to look at it realistically, Christ, the Spirit in a person, the way you get the Spirit is you would have to have been like a sinner beforehand, and you repent, and then you get baptized like as John the Baptist. In your own head, you now baptize yourself to become more like Christ. And then a literal representation of John the Baptist would do the same thing. And that's more of a, if you want to try to believe in the Bible when it comes to the words that they talk about Christ and the actual walking of the water, literal walking on the actual water, sinking down, all these things, if you just think twice, it's okay to think about one thought, but have another one and think about that, and maybe even a third one, and put them on the shelf, come back, get them later on when you can finally put the things together where you can make sense of it, and then you won't live in fear, because you're told that if you want to be like Christ, you are going to die. Yeah, to the world. And then when you die to the world, the government rests on your shoulders. He doesn't even believe whatsoever that Jesus is Jesus. The lowest level tier of the youngest that would be deceived the most. That would be the only begotten Son being given to somebody else to take care of. Just like how King David, at one point, did that thing where he slept with someone, and that woman had a child. I got to brush up on my scripture, but winded up having a child, and he tried to cover it up. So what he did was he slew her husband, the one that, because he was trying to cover it up, like that didn't happen, but it did happen. And then it's really about the promise of hanging this up, and then after that, you can come in as a mason, you can come in as an amazing son, and it's amazing work that you do, and you can come in, and then you get your accolades and everything, but that's the time when you realize what you just did was you did that for nothing, because now you got nothing. And then there was a 40-day period, or they went into the wilderness. So when the Son took over as kingship, then everybody had to run and flee into the wilderness. So there's that wilderness period of time. And the same thing with Christ when he began his ministry in the wilderness. When he ended his ministry, 40 days. The beginning, 40 days tempted by Satan. The ending, up communicating with his disciples after the fact. And 40 is a testing period. So when the son takes over of the kingship and he wants to kill his own father, he may have been told that you're in here for the next 40 years, man. I mean, you want to be in for the next 40 years as king, even though it's only 40 days, but we're going to tell you it's 40 years. So that would be the way to get someone deceived, to get them to give them the authority, and then it doesn't happen. So somewhere along the lines, there's a sacrifice of a son that, as God sacrificed his only begotten son, and then the exact opposite interpretation of the reality would be what Satan is going to do, play the same role, and he's going to give up his only begotten son in order to be a scapegoat, to try to get out of having it done to him. And that's where you got to worry about the actual Judas really hanging himself. The actual Judas, like the way that in other words, the lowest tier level Judas is geared to try to fulfill that actual scripture by literally hanging himself. After he does this and realizes that was a mistake. And then there's another level Judas, which would be, like how I see it, more behind the scenes, because his father is known as Lucifer, and he's able to really see, or known as, or talked about as if, but in the son's mind, the son would be saying, it's just every level. The Lucifer, because it's the spirit of Lucifer from that period of time until the prodigal son returns, the return of him. Until that happens, everybody involved is going to think that that's who they are, all the way up the line, and then come to find out it's a spirit, that there's one mouthpiece that started it, and that one mouthpiece that started it would be the mastermind behind it. The whole entire setup, how it works, and then towards the, I said this before, if you have two twins, both men, and you don't know that they're twins, and then one of them does the serpent race, and then the other one doesn't do anything because he's still a male, but this is just an idea to try to get people to do it, but you really didn't even do it yourself. And as the man, like the Adam, the Eve is the one that did it. The twin did that thing. The whore Babylon, the ones that all the kings of the earth committed fornication with. The kings of the earth, they're the ones that went ahead and did the thing with the harlot, the Statue of Liberty, and they're judged for it. And that's the kingdom that's coming to an end. And that's why Satan knows has a short time. That's why Jezebel is chasing after Elijah. That's why the ending of the story is coming up, and the beginning of the new book is going to be written. But there's groups that believe we're in the halfway point, but we are at the halfway point. Just for who, though, is it at the halfway point? Because when Elijah was lifted up in the whirlwind, and then Elisha started to take the ring with a double portion of that spirit, and then when Daniel was promoted, and then when he was told to go his way until the time be, and he'll stand in his appointed allotted inheritance afterwards. And then when Christ was lifted up on the cross next to the two thieves, next to the two ideas, one of them is repented, the other one isn't, but the two became one in one vessel. As you would think, the perception is that the two became one when they didn't. It's one and the other, but the one together was in paradise on that very day. So yeah, we're in the halfway point. We're at the beginning. We just started. We're getting right towards the ending, and we're halfway there. Again, it'd just be like, doesn't believe, because Jesus was, they all thought that he was gonna like take over the government and be a king or something like that. Like it was gonna happen overnight, and it's just taking too long. So Judus being the king of the Jews, well, no, not literally, because they had their Messiah already. And so that behind the scenes, impatient as Lucifer's child, son of Simon Peter, right? Wasn't Simon Peter the magician? So Judas was the son of Simon Peter, right?
I don't know.
He couldn't have been the son
You
of
need to get your facts
Jesus,
straight,
because
though.
Jesus didn't have any kids, according to the scripture. So he couldn't have been the son of God. He couldn't have been the actual, like the lowest tier level deceived child would be the actual son, because Christ never had children. And another one, Christ was the I see. So the son would be told that he's Jesus because he would be the son of a carpenter. I see where that part can trickle into the minds of people that don't know their role, because that's what the story is. And he never even had a wife. He never even had a relationship. He never even, I don't even know why he had semen. What was the point? He never even did anything. Like he just became celibacy, and then when you do that your entire life, I just don't think it's possible, and it's not healthy. And that's what goes along with the whole "thou shalt not touch." Well, when they told you that, they lied to you about touching yourself, because your own self is your flesh. It's you. It's the same as the internet. The internet itself, it can be one way or another. It's not the fact that the internet is evil. Without the internet, I wouldn't have figured out a bunch of things that I think I might have figured out. All the knowledge that you can get, it's what you do with the internet. It's what you do with your tree of life. When they tell you thou shalt not touch, and everybody goes and does that thing because you did it out of fear, and then now this is the part where the healing has to start coming in, because you're now knowing the truth, and God said he would put enmity between your seed and the woman's seed, the both races, because now you have the godly conscience, but beforehand you didn't, and you went ahead with the host body system. I think you just never did anything wrong. So that's why nobody believes in Jesus. Because if you tell people that you can walk on water and you really can't, well, you're not going to believe that. It took me a long time So let's just to actually believe that Jesus existed and that he would die on the cross, literally die on the cross, even though that happened 2,000 years ago, but people are still sinning more than ever. It's about as at the worst point so far ever in the history of existence and ever will be. And so he died back then. Why? It doesn't even make any sense at all, because the world is as wicked as possible. But I was willing to accept that. All right, I guess I'll just believe that. I'll believe it. I mean, it sucks. All the movies about him getting pierced like that, and even Thomas didn't believe him until the very end, when he was able to thrust his hand through his I won't believe you, Jesus, until I torture you myself. I don't believe you. And then that's how he believes him afterwards. So it's like he has to be a part of the crucifying Jesus in order to believe him. So he basically has to come. Doubting Thomas, he needed to see Christ rise from the dead before he can believe him. And that's what happened. To say that he literally died on the cross and we beat the piss out of him.
You sound like an
day in and
atheist.
day out.
You know that?
That way, there's one way of the scriptures being fulfilled as a sacrifice. And there's people that know that and they don't care, because they need to get out of it. No, it's him over there. No, that's not Jesus. No, it was him. So the second tier would be Judas himself as the father of the Judas, second one being the character that is saying to Jesus, you move over, just move over. I'll take control here. It's time for me to be king. And then he hangs it up. He hangs it up. His career. Let's put it this way: Judas, I believe the real Judas, because there's a cast being played for Judas. There's a couple of them. There's a few Jesus. There's a few of everybody. The real Judas is the one that truly knows Christ is Christ, but is put in place to be that middle ground to trick the minds of those that cannot perceive it correctly. So whoever Judas was would know that this is a trick played all the way through, and you're just part of it, and it won't work unless you do your trick as well. He spills his guts is what he does. So one of them is trying to get someone to spill their guts and follow the Judas role to fulfill that. Another one would be spilling his guts and like coming clean, and because that's the real interpretation, to be quite honest.
You think?
Judas hanging up his actual career.
Don't be so dogmatic.
Spilling
there,
his
Robin.
guts. Decreasing so Christ can increase. He dies by hanging himself. Christ is crucified. And in this video, as soon as this happens, those two witnesses, they stop withholding the rain. The rain comes down, the truth is told, and this is why they came and took the body of
Elisha,
because the
gets a
Jews
double portion.
said, we have our Messiah, Barabbas. We have him. Barabbas
And
has
then-
a son.
And then Joseph gets
He gets put in place next to the Pharaoh, second charge. Over there, that he's telling that he's Barabbas and he's Judas, or he's Lucifer. And Daniel gets promoted as like his spirit is first in charge. So he's technically like a prince to the King Neb, but also, but also like a king because of the spirit. It's like Christ was the king of the Jews. The literal ones, no, not right away, but the inward ones, the ones that you're circumcised inwardly, your heart. And then there's the other, they're going to do the circumcision, and then the actual deeper circumcision, uprooting, plucked up twice, and replanted, because that's Cain's. It's his work. It's what he's been doing his whole life. It's his whole thing. He just wants some credit for it. Well, look, I've always said this: everybody's body is their own body. It's free will with your body, but when you're forced to do something, because people make decisions on their own, like they want to do this because of their reasons. You're told not to touch it, but it's because you don't see it at the moment. But when you turn to God and you repent, then you're going to understand why He was trying to tell you not to touch it. Don't touch that idea. Don't touch that idea what the serpent told Eve. Because once you turn back and you repent, it's harder at first to deal with that, because it's a decision that you made. And is there a way to reverse it? Is there a way to reverse what was done? Well, at this moment, that's not even an option, because you either do or you don't. If you don't, the fear is it's going to happen anyway, even in a more painful way, because if you do now, at least there's surgeons to take care of you. If you don't want to do it now, you want to hold out till later, well, guess what? It's going to be painful, and there ain't going to be any surgeons around to fix anything. So why do you think people do the things that they do? Because they are deceived by the spirit that works in the children that are disobedient. And then there's another one that's being brainwashed into trying to get him to believe it, that he's just going to rule the planet. So, well, that would be the one that's told, that would be at this time, it would be where it's the carpenter's son. So whatever it is you tell him, he's doing. And this is why I look at it as, what if there was 3 types of Jesuses, 3 types of Lucifers, 3 types of Judus? Well, there's definitely 3 types of Jesuses. I've seen at least 3 types on the internet. This is 3 types of every, but there's a couple are in league with the spirit itself, which passes off as, when people are playing the Jesus role, in the end they actually become Christ, because they become the body of Christ, and that's why that whole body becomes one part. Everybody, because there's definitely 2 ways of doing this. There's the concealment, and then if you turn it upside down and put the key in the lock and lock the door sealed tight, then 12 noon would be the time that bad boy rises up inside of the host body system, whether you like it or not, because it's programmed to do it. And then you just have to deal with the consequences of when your mind changes from demonic to angelic. You start to think twice about your thoughts and decisions that you've done and said, and then you realize, this isn't what I want. And if anybody can show you this beforehand, you might want to take it serious, especially if you know all about it as the clay of the potter, because the potter's clay, those that are behind the scenes, part of this potter's clay You know that this is true. You know that this is true. So when this becomes true, Wells Fargo Bank. So that's where I got cut off at. That's why I'm doing this with Robin here. Thanks for the input there. Thanks a lot.
Though Judas was chosen to be one of the 12 in John chapter 6, verse 64, all scripture evidence points to the fact that he never believed Jesus to be God.
So that would be the middle interpretation. He's correct, because there is somebody that doesn't believe that he is God, so that's why he's the one that's going to betray him. But he's not catching on to the top tier and then the lower tier possibility.
He may not even have been convinced that Jesus was the Messiah, as Judas understood it. Unlike the other disciples that called Jesus Lord, Judas never used this title for Jesus, and instead called him Rabbi, which believed he could profit from collections taken from the group. The fact that Judas was in charge of the money bag for the group would indicate his interest in money in John chapter 13, verse 29. Additionally, Judas, like most people at the time, believed the Messiah was going to overthrow Roman occupation and take a position of power ruling over the nation of Israel.
He did. He just worked in their hearts, but he wasn't put up on stage as that person.
Judas may have followed Jesus hoping to benefit from association with him as the new reigning political power. No doubt, he expected to be among the ruling elite after the revolution. By the time of Judas's betrayal, Jesus had made it clear that he planned to die, not start a rebellion against Rome. So Judas may have assumed, just as the Pharisees did, that since he would not overthrow the Romans, he must not be the Messiah they were expecting.
To Judas, Jesus wasn't talking about a literal death, just so you know.
There are a few Old Testament verses that point to the betrayal, some more specifically than others. Here are two. Even my close friend, whom I trusted, he who shared my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. Psalm 41, verse 9. See the fulfillment in Matthew 26, verse 14 and 48 through 49. Also, I told him, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they pay me 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they priced me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them into the house of the Lord to the potter. Zechariah 11 verses 12 through 13. See Matthew 27 verses 3 through 5 for the fulfillment of the Zechariah prophecy. These Old Testament prophecies indicate that Judas's betrayal was known to God, and that it was sovereignly planned beforehand as the means by which Jesus would be killed. But if Judas sovereignly planned beforehand of the Zechariah prophecy, these Old Testament prophecies indicate that Judas's betrayal was known to God, and that it was Judas's betrayal was known to God. Judas's betrayal was known to God, and that it was sovereignly planned beforehand as the means by which Jesus would be killed. But if Judas's betrayal was known to God, did Judas have a choice, and is he held responsible for his part in the betrayal? It is difficult for many to reconcile the concept of free will as most people understand it. For many to reconcile the concept of free will as most people understand it with God's foreknowledge of future events, and this is largely due to our limited experience of going through time in a linear fashion. If we see God as existing outside of time, since he created everything before time began, then we can understand that God sees every moment in time as the present. We experience time in a linear way. We see time as a straight line we pass through from one point gradually to another, remembering the past we've already traveled through, but unable to see the future we are approaching. However, God, being the eternal creator of the construct of time, is not in time or on the timeline, but outside of it. It might help to think of time in relation to God as a circle, with God being the center and therefore equally close to all points.
The Spirit of God is this: the present moment. Living in the past, worrying about the future, walking around on this planet in your flesh, consumed with thoughts of what was or what could be, instead of what is at this exact moment, right now. What are you doing right now? That's God.
In any case, Judas had the full capacity of making his choice, at least up to the point where Satan entered into him in John 13, verse 27. And God's foreknowledge in no way supersedes Judas's ability to make any given choice. Rather, What Judas would choose eventually, God saw it as a present observation, and Jesus made it clear that
Look, Judas, also, you're not meant to hang. Well, you already know that you're not meant to hang yourself, because you've been already given. It's like, you've been given the 30 shekels, so you already know that you're not actually going to hang yourself, but you will spill your guts.
Judas was responsible for his choice and will be held accountable for it. I tell you the truth. One of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. Mark 14, verse 18. Notice that Jesus characterizes Judas's participation as a betrayal. And regarding accountability for this betrayal, Jesus said, "Woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been
The only begotten."
born." Mark 14, verse 21. Satan too had a part in this, as we see in John 13, verses 26 to 27, and he too will be held accountable for his deeds. God in his wisdom was able, as always, to manipulate even Satan's rebellion for the benefit of mankind. Satan helped to send Jesus to the cross, and on the cross, sin and death were defeated, and now God's provision for salvation is freely available to all who receive Jesus Christ as Savior. Want to learn more?
Though neither of these things are confirmed, Judas was one of the 12 apostles, meaning he was one of Jesus' most trusted friends and allies. However, he is always mentioned last. His role was as the treasurer. Judas is mostly known for betraying Jesus, revealing his location and identity with a kiss in exchange for 30 pieces of silver. Now, what was Judas's ultimate fate? What happened to Judas after the betrayal? As we all know, Judas's turning in of Jesus to the priests resulted in Jesus' crucifixion. That's not really questioned. But we again have conflicting accounts on Judas's fate afterwards. In what is the most popular of these accounts, we again have the Gospel of Matthew. Upon hearing the news of Jesus' crucifixion, Judas was stricken with grief. He attempted to return the silver coins to the priests, who denied their return. A remorseful Judas threw the coins onto the ground as he left. Judas would commit suicide by hanging himself in a tree. The priests then used the money to purchase a field.
So, but Judas, keep this in mind too, or at least Judas should have kept this in mind back then. What if Jesus wasn't really crucified, like as in a literal sense, and we were all taught that he literally was? What if he wasn't, but that's what you perceived, and then you felt so bad and then you hung yourself? But the reality was, 3 days later, he rose back up from the dead. You just didn't believe that he would rise back up from the dead, because you thought that he died. It's not that he actually rose up from the dead, because he had already risen up from the dead, as the bones inside of your own, like as dry bones of the ground rises up, and you being the grave, you rose up. So he already rose from the dead. So to Judas, you always got to think twice about these things. Like, what if that literally didn't take place? Well, what if the other Judas in place knows that as well, but wants to still be in charge, or believes that he will die and he's okay with it? So it's like one Judas thinks that it actually happened, and then he's so guilt stricken by it that he actually hangs himself. And the other Judas, he already knows who Jesus was, but he wanted to be in charge anyway. And after the fact, then he spilled his guts and he hung himself. And then the other Judas was the one that hung up his career at the end afterwards and fulfilled the greatest trick on earth. These are all just thoughts of different scenarios as to how broken bones on the left and on the right. And I mean, you see this here, crucified upside down. See that the upside down cross there? If you just look at it from there.
Book of Acts, which is actually written by the same author as Luke, so they're kinda one and the same story-wise. Judas showed no remorse for his actions. He used his blood money to buy a field, again, the field of blood. and in what could have been seen as an accident or suicide, he fell headlong into the middle of it, causing all of his guts to spill out before him, in what some see as punishment from God.
Sure hope
In
that
this
ain't
version,
the
Judas
field.
likely died without remorse for his betrayal. However, while these may be considered the canonical version of Judas's death, they aren't the only accounts, and definitely
Because I'll throw ideas out there to think about. You don't have to believe it. You don't even have to take it. But to those that I'm throwing the ideas out there for, I look for like reciprocated responses to be able to see which one of those directions, if all, are likely to be true.
However, while these may be considered the canonical version of Judas's death, they aren't the only accounts, and definitely not the most creative. According to the Gospel of Nicodemus, a fearful Judas went home to his wife and told her that he was going to kill himself because once Jesus came back to life, he would punish him for his treachery. His wife, who was cooking...
Look, again, who's telling you this? The hell? I see. Punish. I mean, they don't just show a turkey leg like that for nothing.
A chicken over a fire, scoffed at the idea, saying that Jesus because once Jesus came back to life, he would punish him for his treachery. His wife, who was cooking a chicken over a fire, scoffed at the idea, saying that Jesus could not be resurrected any more than the chicken could. Right after those remarks, who was cooking a chicken over a fire, scoffed at the idea, saying that Jesus could not be resurrected any more than the chicken could.
Because she has common sense. Judas, listen to your wife. Common sense. She knows that it's not a literal rising up from the dead. Even atheists have more faith in understanding that a rising up from the dead is you were left for dead. You were that's it. They picked their Messiah. The Jews have their Messiah. They're going to pick him. And they left you for dead. And then when you rise up because of who they picked is the one that hands it over, then, you know, the true picking of it, then the only thing that takes place is the resurrection of that life that was dead. So, look, Judas, keep in mind, if I could have talked to him back then, I would have said, keep in mind that when you see that Christ dies because of what you did, just hold off a few days. Just wait a couple days. Just wait it out. Don't go hanging yourself literally with a rope. Don't do it. Don't do this either, because thou shalt not touch the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. Just don't touch it. Because at this time for you, Judas, thou shalt not touch, because what you expect to get after the fact, you're not going to get it, because once you hand them in, it's like, thanks, see you. And then the guilt comes in. So to think that you're going to get punished by Jesus, you're going to get punished by God. The punishment is just the reality that what you thought wasn't going to happen actually did take place. And then you just have to deal with how being in charge was the goal, but it didn't actually take place that way.
Right after those remarks, the chicken sprung back to life. Judas ran away in terror and hung himself. Still, there is an even worse fate for Judas than could. Right after those remarks, the chicken sprung back to life. Judas ran away in terror and hung himself.
Okay. Obviously, I don't remember that being in the Bible here, but again, you can just... I give my opinions too. I give scenarios also.
Still, there is an even worse fate for Judas in the expositions of the sayings of the Lord, written by the church father Papias in a second-hand account in the early 2nd century. Here, Judas meets a rather gruesome and undignifying fate. He attempts to hang himself but is unsuccessful as all of his guts fall out and he's cut down from the tree. Judas...
all of his guts fall out. So, in order to be gutted, like a fish, you get gutted. So they're saying his guts fell out.
from trying to hang himself. That's weird. How I guess if you try to hang yourself in a way and your guts fall out.
Judas lives in agony for several years. His body becomes so bloated and swollen that he can't
Bloated and swollen. If you have that system going on inside, there's constant fluid.
fit through streets that even wagons were capable of. His genitals become infested with worms and pus, and his face is so swollen that his eyes cannot be seen. Judas would die in his house, making the place uninhabitable, as the smell was said to be so bad that at the time of the story's writing, one could not pass through the area without holding their nose. So depending on who you ask, Judas's fate is different. In some, he kills himself in a remorseful state for his wickedness. In others, he is punished by God for his actions, dying with.
And others, he just hung up his career and he didn't do any of it whatsoever.
Without remorse. So what happened?
And then if someone believes that they are the Judas role, and then they go ahead and fulfill it because they think that that's what you need to do, is to, well, you did what you did, so now you know you're Judas, so you know what you got to do. No, you don't have to do any of it.
To Judas after that is his soul, of course. Well, there's not really much on this at all. Judas is mentioned in Dante's Inferno. In Canto 34, Judas is seen in the ninth circle of hell. In the lowest part of the lowest circle, the worst of fraud is here. This iced over place.
That's okay, you can rise up from that. What do you think Christ did? He rose from the dead. He rose up in hell. You can do the same thing. It's not too late. You can be the last one feeling like the worst human being on the planet. It's alright, you can get up.
This is where Satan himself resides, trapped halfway in a frozen lake. The gigantic figure has 3 heads, each chewing on a traitor. The 2 heads on the side endlessly chew on Julius Caesar's murderers, Brutus and Cassius. With their heads facing outwards, they are forever torn to shreds by Satan's teeth, but never fully eaten nor killed. Yet he is reversed, with his legs dangling out of the jaws of the devil.
Reversed.
That soul up there which has the greatest pain, the master said, is Judas Iscariot. With head inside, he plies
Head inside, so the head is inside.
his legs without. This is the last sight Dante sees on his personal tour through hell. Now, of course, the Inferno is not meant to be taken. This is the last sight Dante sees the jaws of the devil. That soul up there which has the greatest pain, the master said, is Judas Iscariot. With head inside, he plies his legs without.
Head inside, he plies his legs. Head inside. Forget the word next, but then add legs.
This is the last sight Dante sees on his personal tour through hell. Now, of course, the Inferno is not meant to be taken as a canonical source, but it does illustrate that Judas is considered one of the worst sinners of all time. One that witnessed Jesus' miracles yet still betrayed him. Jesus does not forgive Judas, perhaps because his sin was too great or because he never repents. Also, considering that he died via the extremely taboo act of suicide or by God himself, the safer bet is to say that he did not earn salvation. Still, there are endless theories as to who this apostle was, why he betrayed Jesus.
Yeah, but when you repent, because Judas repented, he threw the money down. He felt bad. He felt horrible for what he did. So all you gotta do is ask for forgiveness.
Jesus, and what ultimately happened to him after the infamous kiss of Judas. Let me know of some other theories in the comments. And
Just, I just say to people who are playing these roles, don't let literal interpretation lead you astray into like killing yourself or doing away with your tree of life because of the fear that you're told it's going to happen. Just believe in God. Have faith that He won't allow that to continue. How does He not allow it to continue? He doesn't do anything. Well, He reveals secrets. And that's all you really got to do. He reveals secrets to His prophets. And then the word gets through and it comes at everyone like a flood.
let me know what you believe.
Because, of course, His tongue's sticking out, too. Tongue sticking out. His tongue sticking out. This is the area where it was. And so here's the 2 exit holes for the fluid. Tongue sticking out. Hung himself, hanging up, lifted up.
Tap into history's greatest sinner. If you're interested in hearing about another Christian mystery, check out my video on what.
So Judas in Mark, Luke, and John, Judas, nothing happens to him after, he just disappears.
Okay.
In
Well, he goes back to his place after he spilled his guts when he hung up his career.
Matthew's gospel, Judas hangs himself. And what happens is he goes, he feels remorse about what he's done. He's betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. He tries to return the 30 pieces. The high priest won't take it, so he throws them down in the temple and goes off and hangs himself. And the priests then say, oh, we've got these 30 pieces of silver. We can't put them back in the treasury because it's blood money. It's used to betray blood. And so they go off and they buy a field, and it's called the Field of Blood because it's purchased with blood money after Judas has hanged himself.
See, even when Judas hung himself, and it's like Christ told him, you destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. If Judas, it's like if Christ can tell Judas what he's doing beforehand, and he still doesn't get it, it doesn't believe it because there's like a wall up, and then at the end he says, once you're going to betray me, then they're gonna crucify me once and for all, and then that way the next step can happen, and it'll be 3 days, and then you'll see me again. But if Judas already didn't believe from the beginning, then he's not going to believe that. He's not going to wait around 3 days later to see if Christ rises up because he's going to kill himself, because he would be tricked into believing that that's what he's supposed to do, is fulfill scripture that Matthew talked about.
Luke also wrote the book of Acts, as we were saying. And in chapter 1, there's a second account of Judas' death. In this account, what happens is there's nothing about Judas hanging himself, nothing about the priest buying the field. In this account, Judas goes and buys the field before he dies, and he doesn't hang himself. He somehow falls head first, and his intestines break open and bleed all over the ground. And so the people in Jerusalem start calling this the field of blood because Judas bled all over it.
So
those two accounts cannot be reconciled.
Okay. So before we hear Peter's response to that, is the issue then that, you know, we don't know what happened to Judas at all because these accounts, as far as you can see?
I think we can know some things.
Okay.
I think there really was a Judas. I think that he really did betray Jesus to the authorities, and I think he probably came to some kind of untimely death that was somehow connected with a field in Jerusalem.
Of blood. But
I agree, untimely death. When you don't think your career has come to an end, and you think that you're going to continue on for the next 40 years, but it's really 40 days as being promised with anybody that gets a promise, then you're not going to you're not going to see it that way. So your untimely death takes place before you thought it was.
But as to reconciling these two stories, they're just different.
But if you want to read Matthew and say, yes, that's what really happened, or if you want to read Acts, that's what really happened.
It's helpful to drill down on a specific example sometimes.
But there's only one lost, and that is the son of perdition. So the son of perdition. The son of perdition is lost, and that's the only one.
So how do you read these two accounts of Judas's
death?
Sure,
I'd like to come to that first, but I hope also to come back on the whole question of oral tradition.
Okay,
at
we
some
will,
stage.
yeah.
So I think it's really interesting that we got these two accounts, and Bart mentioned two things as he went through the account in Acts. One is he used the word somehow.
He mentioned two things.
Judas somehow, and the phrase is, became headlong. Well, that to me is just crying out for some more details. We need
headlong. From what I've learned about Cain, is the tiller of the land. He offered God a more, better plant that he planted that would be longer, like headlong.
Need to explain. We need some sort of like vertical elevation. Oh, Matthew has vertical
elevation, headlong.
elevation because he has to hang himself. So I'd want to say that the account in Acts is crying out for a bit more to hang himself. So I'd want to say like vertical elevation. Oh, Matthew has vertical elevation.
So you need vertical elevation. It needs to be lifted up.
He has to hang himself. So I'd want to say that
in order to hang yourself, you got to go up. You got to go up.
The account in Acts is crying out for a bit more. And the other issue we got is his intestines. How on earth do his intestines start bursting forth? I mean, like...
I'm not sure how the surgery goes, but...
That wouldn't normally happen if you just
simply
fall.
fell over in
So
a field,
in other words, I'd want to say, that makes a lot of sense. Now, as for...
So how did it happen?
So how did it happen? I'd want to say, I think you can put the two together. Probably the data are underdetermined, as in that is, I can't
give you an answer.
There would be multiple scenarios that would fit
give
those.
Me one.
Exactly. Now he's on the right path because multiple scenarios, because there's multiple people playing the same scenario.
Let's say someone hangs and then the rope snaps, and after they're dead and their entrails burst out.
Okay.
I'm not a medic on that, but
Yes. Okay. So let me ask this: if somebody's hanging and the rope snaps, that's happened before. How do they fall?
Head on.
Do they fall head first?
No, they're back.
Well, it depends what their feet.
Does it depend?
Yes, it does. It depends what they're hanging over.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if you're hanging over something and there's a rock forward and you're going to trip on it and you go head forward, I mean, like these things can happen. I don't know.
It sounds like we're doing CSI here,
I mean, like,
crime scene investigation.
I just think the data's underdetermined.
Let me just say this. Yeah, it's underdetermined. So to reconcile it, you have to come up with a completely implausible scenario to reconcile it. You can reconcile anything. Let me give you an example how you can reconcile anything. Right now in America, they're celebrating the moon landing. 1 out of 6 Americans don't think there was a moon landing. So you have people say there was not a moon landing and people say there was a moon landing. And so, well, how do you, those two, and most human beings would say, well, it either is this or it's not that.
There was a moon landing because they filmed it at the studio.
If you really want to, you could say, oh, no, you can reconcile that because actually they first didn't get there and so they didn't land, but then they circled around the Earth again and went back and they landed the second time. So there wasn't and there was. Now, you could do that, but is it really the best explanation?
We know exactly how things happened. I think there are multiple ways.
Yep, multiple ways. There you go. Multiple ways for different people playing the same role.
When he approached his disciples, gathered together and seated, and offering a prayer of thanksgiving over the bread, he laughed. The disciples said...
So Jesus laughed at him. He said in the beginning that some of the places are missing the words. Now, I just want to hear what the Gospel of Judas even says, because you may think oh no, this is Gnostic, it's a lie. Well, you would be surprised at the ability to be able to perceive it better by hearing it from a different perspective. Look at the Gnostic as, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not, this is what's being played out because we're the ones playing it out. So you might want to read it and pay attention to it.
To him, Master,
because it's more realistic than the actual words themselves.
Why are you laughing at our prayer of thanksgiving? We have done what is right. He answered and said to them, I am not laughing at you. You are not doing this because of your own will, but because it is through this that your God will be praised.
Yeah, so he knows that they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And then
they said, Master, you are the Son of our God.
And by saying that, they're trying to say that he's the son of their God. So the God of this world is playing as if he gave his only begotten son because he's trying to take credit for Jesus because of the things that because of the things that he created in the world, the God in the world, all these matters. But God is the Son of, Jesus is the Son of God, the Spirit Father in heaven, Spirit only. God is a Spirit. So he's trying to, so they believe that he is, as what I'm hearing here, that he's the actual Son of their God that they know literally.
Jesus said to them, "How do you know me? Truly, I say to you, no generation of the people that are among you will know me." The disciples become angry. When his disciples heard this, they started getting angry and
That
infuriated
sounds
and began
right.
blaspheming against him in their hearts. When Jesus observed their lack of understanding,
That's why they turned away.
he said to them, "Why has this agitation led you to anger? Your God who is within you, and have provoked you to anger within your souls. Let any one of you who is strong enough among human beings bring out the perfect human and stand before my face."
I like where this is going, because this Jesus is being more realistic. Like, go ahead and bring out a perfect human, because it doesn't exist.
They all said, "We have the strength." But the spirits did not dare to stand before him, except for Judas Iscariot. He was able to stand before him, but he could not look him in the eyes, and turned his face away. Judas said to him, "I know who you are, and where you have come from. You are from the immortal realm of Barbelo."
So Judas knows who he is and where he came from. Satan knows that too.
"And I am not worthy to utter the name of the one who has sent you."
That sounds like he's humble.
Jesus speaks to Judas privately, knowing
In tongues.
that Judas was reflecting upon something that was exalted. Jesus said to him, "Step away from the others, and I shall tell you the mysteries of the kingdom. It is possible for you to reach it, but you will grieve a great deal, or someone else will replace you, in order that the 12 disciples may again come to completion with their God." Judas.
So this seems to fall more in line with my theory that Judas knew who Christ was, and he has to be taken out, and that the in plate, the puppet king, has to come in as Judas, and he's okay with that name, because he really wants to take the place of Christ.
Said to him, "When will you tell me these things? And when will the great day of light dawn for the generation?" But when he said this, Jesus left him. Scene 2. Jesus appears to the disciples again. The next morning after this happened, Jesus appeared to his disciples again. They said to him, "Master, where did you go? And what did you do when you left us?" Jesus said to them, "I went to another great and holy generation." His disciples said to him, "Lord, what is the great generation that is superior to us and holier than us, that is not now in these realms?" When Jesus heard this, he laughed and said to them, "Why are you thinking in your hearts about the strong and holy generation? Truly, I say to you, no one born of this aeon will see that generation, and no host of angels of the stars will rule over that generation."
So far, he laughed twice.
"And no person of mortal birth can associate with it, because that generation does not come from which has become. The generation of people among you is from the generation of humanity. Power, which the other powers by which you rule. When his disciples heard this, they each were troubled in spirit. Truly, I say to you, all the priests who stand before that altar invoke my name. Again, I say to you, my name has been written on this, of the generations of the stars through the human generations. And they have planted trees without fruit in my name, in a shameful manner. Jesus said to them, those you have seen receiving the offerings at the altar, that is who you are. My name has been written on this, of the generations of the stars through the human generations. And they have planted trees without fruit in my name, in a shameful manner. Jesus said to them, those you have seen receiving the offerings at the altar, that is who you are. That is the God you serve, and you are those 12 men you have seen. The cattle you have seen brought for sacrifice are the many people you led astray before that altar. Will stand and make use of my name in this way, and generations of the pious will remain loyal to him. After
You think Jesus isn't talking about that? See, that's the thing. You get this Gnostic gospel of Judus, but yet you have this host body, and it kind of lines exactly up with what he's saying in this text.
For him, another man will stand there from the fornicators, and another will stand there from the slayers of children, and another from those who sleep with men, and those who abstain, and the rest of the people of pollution and lawlessness and error, and those who say, we are like angels. They are the stars that bring everything to its conclusion. For to the human generations it has been said, look, God has received your sacrifice from the hands of a priest, that is, a minister of error.
Sacrifice from the hands of a priest.
But it is the Lord of the universe who commands. On the last day they will be put to shame. And those who say, we are like angels, they are the stars that bring everything to its conclusion. For to the human generations it has been said, look, God has received your sacrifice from the hands of a priest, that is, a minister of error. But it is the Lord of the universe who commands. On the last day they will be put to shame. Jesus said to them, stop sacrificing, which you have, over the altar, since they are over your stars and your angels, and have already come to their conclusion there. So let them be ensnared before you, and let them go. Generations. A baker cannot feed all creation under heaven, and to them, and to us, and. Jesus said, the souls of every human generation will die. When these people, however, have completed the time of the kingdom and the Spirit leaves them, their bodies will die, but their souls will be alive, and they will be taken up. Judus said, and what will the rest of the human generations do? Jesus said, it is impossible to sow seed on rock and harvest its fruit. This is also the way, the defiled generation, and corruptible Sophia, the hand that has created mortal people, so that their souls go up to the eternal realms above. For I have seen a great vision. When Jesus heard this, he laughed and said to him, you 13th spirit, why do you try so hard?
13th spirit. So in other words, trying to be Jesus, the 13th.
But speak up, and I shall bear with you. Judus said to him, in the vision I saw myself as the 12 disciples were stoning me and persecuting me severely. And I also came to the place where, after you, I saw a house, and my eyes could not comprehend its size. Great people were surrounding it, and that house had a roof of greenery, and in the middle of the house was a crowd, saying, Master, take me in along with these people. Jesus answered and said, Judas, your star has led you astray. He continued, no person of mortal birth is worthy to enter the house you have seen, and you will come to rule over them. In the last days, they will curse your ascent to the holy generation.
Interesting. Sounds like Judas takes the reign and rules over them after Christ is crucified for a short period of time.
Jesus teaches Judas about cosmology, the spirit, and the self-generated. Jesus said, Come, that I may teach you about secrets no person has ever seen, for there exists a great and boundless realm, whose extent no generation of angels has seen.
I've seen miracles that are beyond any miracles I've experienced. I've laid hands on people that are blind. I've seen and experienced miracles that most people can't even imagine happening. They can't even think it. What's happened on this trip to convince me, to assure me, to guarantee me that the Lord's communicated that the King of Kings is coming has all been documented. It's so crazy. It's so crazy you almost couldn't believe it. But I documented it. So, I want to give it to you, but my final part of my task is very early in the morning. Anyway, I'll show you how he communicated that to me. Remember that 320 thing I showed you?
Not a nerd. Suicide. Hanging it up. But not really. Hopefully not. Run to the mountains. Get it done. Birthmark. Being marked.
I'll show it to you. You'll be like, that's impossible. And I'll be, I know, but it happened. See, I'm showing it to you. It happened. It's impossible, but it happened. Not once, not twice, not 3 times.
Great invisible spirit, which no eye of an angel has ever seen, no thought of the heart has ever comprehended, and it was never called by any name. And a luminous cloud appeared there. He said, Let an angel come into being as my attendant. A great angel, the enlightened, divine, self-generated, emerged from the cloud. Because of him, 4 other angels came into being from another cloud, and they became attendants for the angelic
Self-generated from the cloud. Look at the internet as a cloud, and hopping on there and creating your platform as being self-generated.
Generated. The self-generated said, Let come into being, and it came into being. And he created the first luminary to reign over him. He said, Let angels come into being to serve him. And myriads without number came into being at the image and after the likeness of this angel. He made the incorruptible generation of Seth appear, the 12, the 24. He made 72 luminaries appear in the incorruptible generation. Then they will fornicate in my name and slay their children, and they will, and my name, and he will. Your star over the 13th aeon.
This is their children.
After that, Jesus laughed. Judas said, Master, why are you laughing at us? Jesus answered and said, I am not laughing at you, but at the error of the stars, because these 6 stars wander about with these 5 combatants, and they all will be destroyed along with their creatures.